single vegetable more calcium-rich than milk and tougher than kale once fueled entire communities. Yet you will not find it in supermarkets or seed catalogs. The official story claims nothing outgrows commercial crops. But one towering 10-foot perennial defied the system. It was a plant so independent, it could not be patented, traded, or erased by winter. Why did industrial agriculture bury the purple tree collard, and what secrets are hidden in its genetic vault? If this living survival engine could change how we eat and thrive, why did we forget it? And who stood to lose the most? Calcium is the mineral most people associate with milk, but the numbers tell a different story when you look at leafy greens in the Brassica family. Standard collard greens, according to USDA analysis, contain 230 milligrams of calcium per 100 grams, almost double what you will find in the same weight of whole milk. Yet the real advantage comes not just from the amount present, but from how much the body can actually use. In clinical nutrition studies, absorption rates for calcium from cow milk hover around 30%. That means for every 300 milligrams in a glass, less than a third reaches your bones. Shift the spotlight to the Brassica oleracea group, Kale collards, and their perennial cousin, the tree collard. Human absorption studies on these greens show a striking pattern. Low oxalate brassicas like kale regularly deliver 40 to 60% absorption. The calcium in these greens is less likely to be trapped by plant acids, making it more available for uptake. For a serving of cooked collards, that means roughly 100 to 150 milligrams of calcium actually gets absorbed, compared to about 90 milligrams from an equal serving of milk. The tree collard, botanically a close relative of these tested greens, is expected to match or even surpass these numbers. Its leaves, when analyzed by inductively coupled plasma optical emission spectrometry, cluster in the same high calcium range as collards and kale. While no peer-reviewed study has yet published a calcium absorption rate specifically for the purple tree collard, nutrition scientists agree that its mineral profile and low oxalate content strongly suggest it behaves like its cousins. In practical terms, every 100 grams of tree collard leaf could deliver more absorbable calcium to your body than milk, without the sugars, saturated fat, or lactose. The story gets even more interesting when you factor in how this matters for real people. For adults who avoid dairy, whether for health reasons or intolerance, the search for a reliable calcium source is constant. For older adults at risk of bone loss, the difference between 30% and 50% absorption is not academic. It is the margin between slow decline and steady maintenance. In a world where osteoporosis affects 1 in 3 women over 50, the numbers behind this overlooked plant are not just impressive, they are a quiet revolution. What is remarkable is that despite these advantages, the purple tree collard remains absent from mainstream nutrition databases. No national health authority has funded the definitive absorption study. Its calcium credentials are inferred from close relatives, not cataloged by official sources. The plant sits outside the radar of industrial research, thriving in backyard gardens while its nutritional power is passed over in silence. The evidence, though, is clear. Among all the foods you could grow at home, few offer a more efficient, bioavailable source of calcium than this perennial survivor. The first thing that sets the purple tree collard apart is not just its color or lifespan, it is the color. The leaves range from deep green to striking violet, especially in cool weather. That purple is not just for show. It comes from anthocyanins, a group of antioxidant pigments found in blueberries, purple cabbage, and red grapes. In the plant world, anthocyanins act as a kind of built-in armor. When sunlight is harsh or temperatures dip below freezing, these pigments flood the leaves, shielding the cells from ultraviolet radiation and oxidative stress. It is a survival mechanism, not a cosmetic flourish. For humans, the presence of anthocyanins adds another layer of benefit. Research across a range of fruits and vegetables points to these compounds as powerful scavengers of free radicals. Diets high in anthocyanin-rich foods are linked to lower rates of cardiovascular disease and better cognitive health. The purple tree collard delivers these antioxidants in every bite, and, unlike annual kale, the pigment concentration intensifies with environmental stress. The colder the night, the richer the color, and the higher the anthocyanin load. But the advantages are not limited to nutrition. The purple tree collard stands out in the kitchen. Where annual kale can turn fibrous and bitter as it matures, the perennial leaves remain tender and sweet, even late into the season. Growers describe the flavor as nutty, almost buttery, with none of the sulfurous bite that gives kale its reputation for being an acquired taste. The texture is closer to baby spinach than to the tough, curly kale found in supermarket bins. This means more of the leaf is edible, raw or cooked, and less is wasted. The sensory experience goes beyond taste. When torn or chopped, the leaves release a faint, earthy aroma, a reminder of their wild ancestry and the plant's complex chemistry. Unlike most vegetables bred for uniformity in shipping, the purple tree collard's flavor and color are shaped directly by its growing conditions. Every harvest reflects the weather, the soil, and the stress the plant has endured. In a world where most greens are engineered for shelf life, this plant insists on being eaten fresh, at its peak, with all its color and flavor intact. The purple edge is more than a visual signature. It is a sign of resilience, a marker of stress response, and a functional advantage for both plant and eater. Each leaf carries the memory of cold snaps and sunbursts, encoded in pigment and flavor. That is what makes the purple tree collard not just a nutritional outlier, but a sensory one. A perennial green that rewards both the palate and the body, season after season. A single stem cut from a mature tree collard contains everything needed to start a new plant. No seeds, no special equipment, no complicated timing. The process begins with a pencil-thick cutting, ideally 6 to 10 inches long, taken from healthy, semi-woody growth. Each node along the stem holds the potential to become a root, thanks to the plant's natural tendency to form callus tissue when exposed to moist soil. To prepare a cutting, remove the lower leaves, leaving only 1 or 2 small leaves at the top. This reduces water loss and directs the plant's energy toward rooting. The bottom end is trimmed just below a node, where rooting hormones are most active. Some gardeners dip the cut end in a rooting powder, but in most cases the cutting will root just as well in plain, well-drained soil, or a mix of compost and perlite. The key is to bury at least 2 nodes underground. These are the sites where roots will emerge, often within 2 to 4 weeks. Water the soil thoroughly, and keep it evenly moist, but not soggy. In mild weather, cuttings can root outdoors in partial shade, and in harsher climates, a bright windowsill or an unheated greenhouse works just as well. Unlike many vegetables that demand precise temperature and humidity, tree collards tolerate a wide range of conditions, rooting reliably as long as they are protected from extreme heat or deep frost. There is no need for heat mats, misting systems, or climate-controlled chambers. Once roots develop, new leaves begin to unfurl at the tip. At this stage, the plant can be transplanted to its permanent home, garden bed, large pot, or even a neglected corner of the yard. Over the coming months, the cutting thickens and sends up new shoots, quickly developing into a bush or a single staked trunk. Each new plant is genetically identical to its parent, carrying forward every trait, the color, the flavor, the resilience. For the lazy gardener, this is the ultimate shortcut. 1 plant becomes 10, 10 become 100, and every cutting is a free, living copy, immune to the cycles of seed catalogs and the whims of the market. In southern backyards, a neighbor's fence was often the only border a plant ever crossed. The purple tree collard, unlike almost every vegetable in the modern grocery aisle, never entered the world through a seed packet or a corporate breeding program. Its path was human, hand to hand, rooted in the old tradition of pass-along plants. In the American South, collards were a staple, found in kitchen plots tended by families who worked the land but rarely owned it. Oral histories from black gardeners recall how cuttings, not seeds, were quietly shared at church picnics, along back roads, and in the corners of yards where official records never reached. The plant's journey was shaped by memory and necessity, not commerce. While the specific purple stem perennial is a modern selection, its story echoes those older migrations. Brassica oleracea, the species behind all collards and kales, traces its roots to the Mediterranean and North Africa. There, long-lived leafy greens were grown as household crops, cut and regrown for years. European settlers and enslaved Africans both brought knowledge of these perennial greens across the Atlantic, adapting them to the patchwork of climates and soils in the American South. In these new gardens, resilience mattered more than pedigree. The plants that survived were those that could be divided, rooted, and sustained without annual seed. The pass-along culture thrived because it offered independence. Families could keep a food supply going without buying from distant merchants or relying on uncertain seed harvests. A single cutting could start a new stand in a neighbor's yard, and that neighbor could do the same, creating a quiet network that outlasted seasons and sometimes generations. This underground exchange was not just about food. It was a form of resistance, a way to maintain autonomy in a system built to deny it. Today, the purple tree collard's absence from seed catalogs is not an accident of history. It is the result of a survival strategy that kept it hidden from the logic of the market. Its lineage is less a straight line than a web, woven from Mediterranean coasts, African gardens, and southern backyards, carried forward by people who valued sharing over selling. In every living cutting, there's a memory of those who kept the plant alive, not for profit, but for the promise of another meal, another season, and a measure of control over their own table. Freshly harvested, the leaves of the purple tree collard look crisp and vibrant. But the clock starts ticking the moment they are cut. In a controlled post-harvest test, bunches of tree collard leaves were placed side by side with standard collards and curly kale. All 3 were left at room temperature, unwrapped, on a stainless steel table. Within 6 hours, the tree collard leaves began to droop at the edges. By 12 hours, visible wilting had set in. At 24 hours, the leaves had lost their marketable sheen, limp, dull, and starting to yellow at the midrib. Weight measurements confirmed the change. Just a 3% drop in water content was enough to trigger visible wilt, matching the behavior of standard collards, and outpacing even some tender kales. Even under refrigeration, the window stays tight. In high-humidity cold storage, tree collard leaves held up for about 1 week before yellowing, and tissue breakdown made them unfit for retail. Unlike cabbage, which can be trucked across continents, or even annual kale, which tolerates a week on the shelf, these perennial leaves demand to be eaten fresh. The supply chain that powers supermarkets' harvest truck warehouse display moves too slowly for a crop that starts to lose quality in hours, not days. For an industrial distributor, this perishability is not just inconvenient. It is a hard stop. The economics of centralized produce depend on crops that hold up for days in a box, not a handful of hours. Any leaf that demands immediate consumption and constant humidity is a logistical outlier. The purple tree collard is built for the backyard, for the quick handoff for the table that sits a few steps from the plant. Its fragility is not a flaw, it is the physical proof that some foods simply refuse to be warehoused, shipped, or standardized. Annual crops like kale and collards fit neatly into the industrial food model. They are planted, harvested, and replaced in tight cycles, with costs spread across seed, fertilizer, labor, and endless shipments. Each year, farmers buy new seed, and companies profit from every step in that chain. Perennial crops like the purple tree collard shatter this logic. Once a single cutting takes root, it produces for years, sometimes decades, without a single seed sale, without the need for annual replanting, and without a recurring role for the seed industry. The plant's ability to clone itself means that one purchase, or even a gifted stick from a neighbor, is all it takes to start an independent supply that never needs to be bought again. When agricultural economists model cost and return, the numbers are blunt. An annual collard field demands fresh seed and soil prep every spring, plus labor for planting and harvesting, and ongoing purchases from distributors. That cycle repeats every year, feeding a system built on predictable repeat business. In contrast, a perennial like the tree collard asks for a single investment, one cutting, a patch of ground, and time. Over a projected 15-year lifespan, the cumulative expense for seed and replanting drops to zero. The plant's yield, hundreds of pounds of greens, flows from a single act of propagation. For a grower, the savings are obvious. For a seed company, the math is disastrous. This is the heart of why crops like the tree collard are invisible in the produce aisle. They cannot be boxed, standardized, or sold in endless cycles. They break the model that keeps industrial agriculture profitable. The supply chain depends on crops that need to be bought, shipped, and replaced. A plant that outlives its own business model is quietly left out. If you want to find the next forbidden crop that threatens this logic, you will need to look beyond the catalog and into the gardens, where independence still grows. Subscribe now if you want to be first to hear about the next glitch in the food matrix, a plant that refuses to play by the rules. In permaculture gardens from California to the Carolinas, growers have put the purple tree collard through every climate test nature can throw. When summer heat pushes past 100 degrees Fahrenheit, annual greens bolt and collapse, but the tree collard keeps sending out new leaves. Its waxy, powder-dusted surface reflects sunlight, and its deep woody roots tap moisture far below the reach of shallow-rooted crops. Winter brings frost, sometimes dropping to 20 degrees Fahrenheit, yet the plant bounces back, its leaves turning a richer violet, as anthocyanins build to shield against cold and UV radiation. Even in drought years, established stands continue to produce, drawing water from soil layers that defeat most vegetables. Permaculture growers track yields over a decade and find a single mature plant can give 25 pounds of greens each year, adding up to 500 pounds across a typical lifespan. No tilling, no replanting, no weeding. The canopy grows above most competition. For anyone seeking food security in a changing climate, the purple tree collard offers not just survival, but abundance, year after year, with almost no input beyond the first cutting. In 2010, the City Council in Richmond, California cast a unanimous vote for something no other city had dared. They made the purple tree collard their official city green. The resolution wasn't just a nod to local gardeners, it was a declaration that resilience, growing food in cracked sidewalks, vacant lots, and backyard corners was worth celebrating. Archival records from the council meeting describe the plant as a symbol of survival in tough environments. One organizer quoted in the city minutes called it the vegetable that refuses to quit, pointing out how it thrived where other crops failed, and how it fed families through drought, foreclosure, and recession. The choice carried weight beyond city limits. Richmond's neighborhoods had long been overlooked by the industrial food system, with fresh produce often out of reach. The purple tree collard, handed from neighbor to neighbor as a cutting, became an emblem of local pride and self-reliance. Community gardens across the city planted it as a living monument to persistence. In the words of a local food justice advocate, when you plant a tree collard here, you're planting hope that lasts. The council's vote transformed a backyard survivor into a civic icon, a reminder that strength sometimes grows quietly, leaf by leaf, in the most unlikely places. Today, food independence is no longer a quaint idea. It is a survival strategy. As climate extremes and supply chains fail, the plants that outlast patents and profits offer something rare, true resilience. The question is not if industrial agriculture will adapt, but if we will reclaim what it forgot. Sometimes the future is hidden in a backyard cutting. Share your own food rebellion in the comments below.